possibilities. If you are on Zoom, you can write your question in the Q&A, and I'll make sure your question reaches Rachel. And if you are in Facebook, don't worry, you can pop the question there in a comment, and we'll make sure we answer it all. So, without further ado, my colleague Rachel, who is actually located in Amber, Mexico, will be your speaker today. Besides the fact she is one of the great women in gaming, she has a lot of experience, has been a creative producer, a lot of experience in projects with UX and VR. Exactly the topic for today. I had the chance to have a sneak peek of her presentation before, and I can tell you it's really, really interesting. So, Rachel, I'm really happy you were able to join. All technical issues are gone.
Let's hope so. Can you hear me fine?
Perfect, perfect.
Wonderful. Okay, that's good news. Apologies for the technical fun there. Thank you, Andrea. Fantastic. Okay, so let's kick off here. Alrighty. Okay, can you see my screen fine?
Perfect, perfect.
Wonderful. Good, thank you. Thanks, Andrea. Thanks, everyone, for your patience. Apologies for that, and thanks for joining the talk. I'm very excited to share this presentation with you all today. So we'll dive right in. As Andrea said, I'm at Amber, Mexico, here in sunny Guadalajara. Usually sunny, today rather rainy. I have a background in cultural media and journalism, so I've been lucky enough to travel extensively over the last 10 years and work on all kinds of different projects, mostly as a creative producer, really studying engagement through media projects. And I've often been the lead in experimenting with new technologies, so starting with 360 cameras, live streaming, drones, and then around 5 years ago, I found VR. VR found me. And since then, I've been designing VR experiences and games in both Europe and Mexico. And now I'm with, of course, Amber as a user experience lead with them. So today we're going to talk about user experience in the context of experiential design. I'm going to talk a little bit about play and VR, really as tools to tap into a more human-centered design perspective. And then I'm going to share an experiment with you that we ran, some workshops where we tried that out, and I'm going to share with you the takeaways. And I'll kick off with the whys, like why did we do that? But at the end of the talk, what I'm really trying to leave you with are the ideas of the importance of experimentation, of experience design, not only for our players and our clients and customers, but also for each other. And of course, the importance of human-centered design. So let's get into it. Everyone ready? Let's go.
Ready, ready.
Great. So there's a few reasons I wanted to touch on this topic, or I thought it might be fun to share about this. The first one is about your user experience design and really what that is. So you might be familiar with it as usability. Like in this wheel, usable might stand out to you as a UX factor. And there's this bunch of other factors that also come into play. So this is by a pioneer in the UX field, and he's written a bunch of best-selling books and advises a lot of Fortune 500 companies. And he talks about all these other aspects that come into play with UX design. But beyond usability testing, research, and wireframes that you might be familiar with, what we're essentially trying to do is build a culture of a user focus that runs throughout our organization as being done by everyone all the time. And ultimately, we're hoping to create this culture of prototyping, testing, and empathy, and doing that in an agile way, so doing it often in the process. So the process itself is extracting user behavior insights and bringing them back into the design process. And it is a process, it's not a standalone event. It's not a hammer for fixing feature problems. User experience is the outcome, it's what the user gets. So it's advocating for the player in the design process. And so this topic of VR is a good way to illustrate some of those things, because designing immersive, embodied experiences is kind of impossible to pull off without thinking about the user first. Another reason I wanted to talk about this topic today is that we're in this moment of moving towards the experiential age. So you'll hear this almost buzzword now with experiential. You'll have heard it about the experience economy, where people are seeking experiences for their lives rather than just stuff. You'll have heard it in marketing, that we're engaging authenticity and emotions, and in education and a number of other areas. But essentially, we're moving from an age of passive to participatory. So from 2D screens giving us data and information, we're becoming a 3D engaged, embodied age with our technologies. And so this shift you can consider as a shift to more holistic thinking. We have to think about environment, music, engagement, senses. And in gaming, you'll know that for a long time, we already do that a lot because we have the ability to make choices, to empower our decisions, and to express agency. And so now with immersive tech, we're really layering on top of that. Ken Bai is a journalist who studies VR, and he's interviewed thousands of people and tried thousands of experiences. And he talks a lot about experiential design and this shift from information age to experiential age. And he talks about it in the context of building different kinds of presence. And today we're going to talk quite a bit about presence and what that means. But to dig into that deeper, this is how he considers the move from the information to the experiential age. Suffice to say, right now, consider it from passive to interactive, 2D to 3D, and a shift to a more holistic and sensorial kind of design. So the last reason is the sign of the times. We're in this fascinating moment when we're all remote very suddenly. And so maybe the importance for conversations about what meaningful engagement is together is amplified right now. And when you look at the concerns of managers of remote teams, they're really concerned about reduced focus. And we can see focus as presence. Also for employees, they're concerned around how to collaborate and communicate in meaningful ways with their colleagues. And this is a data set that was taken actually before COVID. So these are people, I think 3,500 in this study, who already were familiar with remote work. So these were the challenges that they really saw from experiencing remote work. So let's talk about virtual reality and human-centered design in the context of VR. And you might be thinking, okay, what is a UX designer in immersive design? So we're going to touch on that. We're not going to talk too much about 3D interaction design, how to design for VR, but I do want to touch on the importance of presence as UX designers and how we deal with that in VR. So of course, UX designers were very concerned with how we measure and test everything. So let's start there and a shortcut back to what that means for design. We measure the success of an experiential technology in its level of presence. So the higher the level of presence, the higher the quality of the experience. And we're entirely focused on presence, immersion, and engagement. We're still heavily focused on the fundamentals of good and agile testing and prototyping. Actually, lo-fi prototyping in VR is super fun. It's tricky, but a lot of fun. So if you can imagine just setting up a room, a space where you work, and finding every standing lamp in the building and pinning notes to it and hanging things from strings in the ceiling and asking a colleague to hold up an arrow sign to see if you walk towards that, and really walking through the experience before you build anything. So the same fundamental principles of what we do when we do quick, agile, lo-fi testing as UX designers. And there's an importance to follow real-world physics. You need to understand and feel that gravity feels like gravity, for example. So you're trying to achieve a maximum plausibility for the player. And if you look at research by Mel Slater in London, he talks a lot about the plausibility and place illusions when you're designing immersive experiences. It has to feel like you could be there, and it has to feel plausible. The US Army has also invested huge resources in the study of measuring presence. So we have data to call on. And we test it with subjective questionnaires. We measure emotional and physical results, and you can measure presence through behavior. So you may have seen someone take off a headset and be like, whoa, I'm back in the room. How long was I in there? So these kind of signals are really important for measuring that presence. And you may have also seen the videos of people falling over in VR. In case you haven't, you won't miss an opportunity to do that. Here's an example. So I've put hundreds of people into VR in VR conferences and expos and events, and I can thankfully say that no one has ever actually hurt themselves. Thank goodness. Let's see if we can play this guy. Okay, I will share the link with you if we don't get to see that. But it's a great example of people, if you look for videos like this, you can see that people are incredibly immersed in the way that they don't understand their surrounding environments. And what that measures and what that means is that we're accessing a flow state. So they're in the zone. And you will have heard about and seen this research. It's much cited right now, work. And it really means that your surroundings melt away. So much like game design, we're trying to achieve that flow state. Similarly, we're trying to make sure that we give our players co-authorship of the experience. So what we're trying to do is set up the environment for the player to create their own experience through the game. And if you think about workshops and when we're imagineering together and going through design processes, we're trying to do the same thing as designers. We're trying to bring people into that ideation part of design thinking where they really get to melt away and tap into their creativity. So you can imagine that VR is a great tool for tapping into that. And we're trying to move from a passive situation and tap into that play state. Because the opposite of play isn't work, it's depression. And this a famous quote now by Brian Sutton Smith, who's a theorist on play in the human experience and really an advocate for play in adulthood. It's something that he says we miss out on by thinking that's just for children. And when he and also Stuart Brown from the National Institute of Play in California, they both talk about all these different kinds of play. So it can be embodied, this essential social play that we go through, and all these others, imaginative, rough and tumble, body play. And so you can begin to imagine how quickly VR taps into all of those. And things happen in our brains when we enter this play state. And the advances in neuroscience over the last years have been incredible in measuring what happens to us when we're in a state of play and what happens to us when we tap into empathy. And so I point you towards the work of Nani de la Peña, who is the CEO of the Biometric group, and she came from a journalist perspective dealing with VR. So she's made experiences of refugees, for example, returning to Syria after the war. She's done work at the northern Mexican border and has a body of work of really exploring what an empathetic connection means. And the scientific research to show that the memories that you make in VR are indistinguishable to the brain from regular everyday memories. And of course, the impact that that can have is dramatic. Also, Chris Milk, who is the CEO of Within, that have a compelling collection of work now and continue to keep coming up with very new work in VR. And you may know a music video from 10 years ago. It was an Arcade Fire song, and you would go into your PC and you would enter a website, and it would ask you to put in your first childhood home. Andrea, I don't know if you remember this music video. You would put in the address of your childhood home, and then a figure in a hoodie would start like running down a street. And you begin to realize the song is playing, and you begin to see that it's your street and it's where you grew up. And the figure gradually runs all the way to your house. Do you remember that?
Actually, I don't, but I think it's like, it's making me feel a bit old.
Yeah, 10 years.
10 years.
It's very cool. And
Sounds
so Chris,
cool.
yeah.
10 years ago, like they were doing that. Nice.
Exactly. So he's been so engaged in the study of this engaging interactive media for that long, and then came to VR. Right. So there's been a lot of studies about neuroscience and empathy, and you might be thinking, okay, like, so what does it really mean, empathy? We've got certainly the first perspectiveness of VR, so you can understand, okay, I'm in someone's shoes. But beyond that, there have been studies on the topic that show how we might be more empathetic and compassionate in VR. In one study, some participants were taken through a VR experience called Becoming Homeless, for example. And later, the group who did the VR were more empathetic towards the homeless and more likely to sign a petition supporting affordable housing than other participants. In other studies, people were taken through a racial discrimination experience in VR and became less biased to people of color. And likewise, they've done similar studies with age and ageism. In another study, people showed that they were more curious and more committed to studies like climate change, for example. So what is really going on there? Well,
I think it's really interesting, Rachel. It's like having the power to create social responsibility through VR, civic responsibility, and so on. It's like a really cool superpower that VR can use. Really nice.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's exciting and it's optimistic, isn't it? We hear a lot of things that aren't about where new technology is going. And I think this is a really nice flip side to that. Absolutely. And you see people going, for example, for the United Nations to try and raise certain issues, and they go there with a VR experience to exactly try and use it for good. Yeah. Yeah. So the science behind it, there's an experiment called Rubber Hands. And two scientists published this work to great acclaim with neuroscientists. And it's a really big step in understanding how we bodily self-identify. And let's see if this video works for you. Hoping yes.
if it doesn't work, it's okay. We'll send people the link over Facebook and so on. But I can tell, because I remember this when I first saw it. I even had a reaction, even if I was a viewer. So the thing is that the
Nice.
fake hand there and the touch that this person was actually feeling on his hand behind that wall, it was like making his sight real, and combined with the kinesthetic of what he was feeling over the wall, made him actually believe that when the other person came with a fork to put in his fake hand, he actually had the reaction of running away. And I had the reaction of doing the same while I was watching the video. So that was the power of the sight.
Andrea, you're super empathetic, I think.
Yes, I am.
You felt
Yes,
it through the video.
Exactly.
Nice. Yeah, that's exactly right. And there are experiments like this, for example, when putting an ice cube on the rubber hand, the person feels the cold and react to the cold. And you can put the ice cube onto the real hand and they don't feel a thing. And the same with fire, even. So really incredible impact. And so what neuroscientists think are happening there is a process of neuroplasticity where our brains are actually changing in real time because we're having a reaction to an embodied experience that we think is our own. And so some scientists, it's a very new field, but some scientists think that this is attributed to mirror neurons in our minds. And that means that we mirror what we see is happening in somebody else as if it's happening to us. And so when we talk about empathy, that's what we're talking about. So we started a project as a collective of people interested in the potential, the positive potential of tech. And we wanted to explore that. And frankly, we were also concerned around the negative implications that we hear about, which are very real. So biometric data collection, for example. We have a third-party doctrine right now, which means that if you give access, yes, I accept, I didn't read all of this text, but I accept you to take my data. The third-party doctrine means that, for example, the US government could then access that information without getting any further warrants or permissions from you. So is that still a suitable means of giving permission? When you're talking about subconscious reactions to the world, when do your palms get sweaty? When do your pupils dilate? Do you know? Do you want other people to know that? And so it's a really interesting topic for us and continues to be now. And we see some interesting examples with the Oculus Quest 2, for example, hardware, which is super cool because you have your hardware, but you don't need to be tethered to a PC anymore with the inside-out tracking. You can move around your environment freely, but actually you can't log into that hardware right now unless you do it through a Facebook account. And we see an interesting example with Fortnite now, and their pushback with removal from the Apple Store. And so there are these really interesting conversations to be had around the technology and the implications of it. So when we started this project, just to give you some context, it was just less than 4 years ago, November-ish. And this project and the inspiration for it were around a troubling social and political time around extreme polarization. And we wanted to dig into what diversity and inclusivity really meant. And here's a definition for you from the United Nations, who did a report on technology, on inclusion and diversity. And diversity, they say, is the identity. So who we are, where we're from, how we think. And inclusion is engagement, empowerment, and being enabled, being able to share your ideas and have your voice heard. And I think it's fair to say that's something that we're all still very interested in and lucky enough to work in an industry where this is openly discussed and explored. And just to wrap on this point, there's a quote here from Kate Crawford from the AI Institute, and expresses it well. And we've seen a rising concern, even recently, with examples of, for example, biased facial recognition technology, which we could say is sexist or racist, by which the technology is much more likely to misidentify women and people of a darker skin color. And particularly significant when we're talking about software that's being funded, built, and sold by software giants to, for example, national police departments without any real vetting or regulation in place. And so, just to touch on the data of who is writing software, you can see that this is the world's largest annual survey of people who code. This is from 2019. And you can see how overwhelmingly it's white men of European descent who remain the majority of developers. So diversity and inclusion, very important. So what to do about it? Let's get creative with the challenge at hand. So as a means to explore user experience design for immersive tech, we put together some design thinking-led game jams. So the difference here from a regular game jam was that it was people out with gaming that might have no experience of what a game jam really means or building a game is, and we framed it as building an experience. And we took people from very different industries. So here we have a cell biologist, a leader in innovation, business innovation. We have one programmer, we have an illustrator, an actor. So we really try to invite as many people as we can from different groups to diversify their points of view. And as you can see from the questions that we asked, who are you and why are you there? And what's the beginning and the end? And what does the world look and feel like? And so when I say that designing VR has to be from a human perspective, this is exactly what I mean when we start with those questions. And you can see here how storytelling is such a key for designing VR. It's the glue that holds the experience together, and it's also what drives engagement. So the design thinking-led process that we moved through in these game jams was to empathize, to define, to ideate, to prototype, and to test. And so we were very focused on the first half of that process, with a really concentrating on leveraging the collective thinking of the group, engaging with each other, listening and building on each other's ideas. So that ideation section was central to what we were trying to do, and also empathizing, which I'll talk more about. And you might know from UX design what we really do when we're trying to empathize. One of the tools we use is empathy mapping. So we went through a process of really trying to get into the minds of our users before we even started designing an experience. And so in this particular case, this was the experience that the group designed. So here we had two completely different puzzles to represent the left and right side of the brain, really as a metaphor for diversity of how we can approach thinking. And this kind of neural network over the roof, which would change color, and the music would change depending on where you spent your time. And then we would measure the data from when you were in the experience, how long did you take in certain areas, what were your biometric reactions to being in those places. But you might think, hey, how did you build this in a day? So we didn't. We designed this in the group in one day, and then we decided to pay a developer to build the experience. At which point you're thinking, so where is the value here? Like, how can these workshops, how can we be putting this outcome of having to pay to build the actual experiences each time? And in this case, we wanted to build it to try it out and test it and continue with this group. But we started to dig into value proposition design as a result of that conversation. So getting down to business, where is the value in something? So we took a bit of a dive into startups and business design and value proposition design. And this was 2016 Berlin in Germany, where there's a lot of buzz and action and energy around startups, especially in tech. And so through this process, I met Klaus Kammermeier, who is running innovation labs in Berlin. He is an innovation professional who advises businesses all around the world, has been doing it for a long time. He's a professor who teaches business design, and he mentors startups and established companies about how to tap into innovation. And we teamed up because he was leading innovators through this design thinking process also, and he also found the empathy part took a lot of time to invest in how to get people into other people's minds. And he also found that identifying pains and gains, identifying value proposition was something that wasn't easy to do with people out with UX design or out with business education in any way. These things were tricky for both of us. So we teamed up. And when I say pains and gains, what we do as designers is try to identify the pains and gains of the users first, and then design gain creators and pain relievers to directly correlate with those things so that we know that we're providing value for our users because we went through this process first. But getting meaningful answers is tricky. So you can make a bunch of assumptions and generalizations about your users, but actually drilling into what those pains and gains are is a tricky process. And so I have a question for you to try and illustrate that. I would like to know what everybody thinks is the number one reason that startups fail.
And for that, because we have the chance for you guys to comment here in the Zoom, please try to add your answers. And for those of you who are on Facebook, write it in a comment there. So, Rach, if you can ask the question again. Let's see if we have answers.
Why do startups fail? What is the number one reason? So get yourself into the mind of a young, ambitious entrepreneur. You have a world-changing idea. You'll invest all of your resources, your money, your time, your love, your energy, everything into this idea, maybe for years, because you're so sure that it's really going to have a big impact on the world or make you millions. You're absolutely convinced that this is worth dedicating all of those things to.
So we have one answer saying probably because they develop a solution that nobody is going to use.
Aha, interesting.
Interesting.
Okay,
let's see if we have more. So guys, it's not a contest, it's just what do you think? Why do startups fail? We're curious to find out more.
Wait, we need to offer a reward. What's the reward?
Exactly.
Great.
So they developed without having a problem as motivation, giving up when facing troubles, setting unrealistic goals, trying to do too much too soon, maybe.
Yeah.
Rachel, please tell us.
Good. So the number one reason, you're right, is that there was never a market need. So this 42%, no market need for that business. You didn't test assumptions, and you move forward with something that the market never actually needed. And so testing assumptions is so much of what we do as UX designers, and this is why it's the same when we're designing a feature. We can't just assume that it's something that our players want. We have to test that assumption and make sure that we know and throw it out or move forward in a different way. But we need to collect the data. And as UX activities, we're discovering exploring, we're testing, we're listening, and there is no replacement for this. So these workshops that I'm talking about tapping into empathy, are not a replacement for getting out there and testing assumptions and collecting data and analyzing and evaluating. So I'm going to shortcut through some of the project that I wanted to show you for the reasons of time. And I'm just going to give you a very quick overview, and I'm just going to take another 5 minutes so we leave time for that Q&A at the end that we said we would have. But we ran a second version of this workshop, and the goal was to prototype user profiles in VR to quickly build empathy, gain clearer understanding of that product market fit, and improve value proposition design. And the aims and benefits being to achieve a deeper understanding and get more accurate results quickly, enable collaboration in those VR spaces, build diverse ecosystems around new technology, which we've mentioned, apply this toolkit to other fields, and to enable that multidisciplinary collaboration. So designing with, not designing for. And when you need to do this, when you need to tap into those pains and gains, break those things down. Like, what does that really mean? How do I get truly insightful answers? And you break it down into gains being what would make this person's life easier. So you've done your research, you have your data on your customer segments, you've built robot-based personas, and then you have like tenacious Trish. So what would make tenacious Trish's life easier? What makes her look good? What makes her happy? What is she looking for most, etc. So drill down into that as far as you can. And the same with pains. What would make that person's life worse? What problems are they running into when they try to use your solution, your feature, or your product? And so we put people into an embodied experience where they got to jump into VR, hop into a character, and record statements that they had written about their personas. And they got to act those out and record them as embodied 3D characters in the workshop. And you can see here that there's no hierarchy in this room. You cut through in a very short time to get to the fun and imagineering and tap into all that good innovation and ideation stuff that we're trying to get to when we're going through the ideation phase of that design thinking process. So you can see here everyone having a good time. And then we would record videos as characters. You could be aliens, you can be people, and you're really trying to record those pains and gains for the people in an embodied way. And it really makes a huge difference to how much you get into the mindset of those personas that you've created. And not only does that happen in the room for your teams and for each other, but these little videos are takeaways back to your teams and back to your organizations where you can show what and why you're designing things for. Like, why did you come up with this? And it's much easier to communicate that in this way. So the takeaways of what we learned from the process is that we did discover insights in a short time. It was very efficient. Just a day or two, and you could get insights you'd be looking for months. It was grounded in this human-centered perspective. So we made sure that the people that we had in the room were diverse, and therefore we could get good representation. We broke down a lot of walls between people in the room. So a lot of the long-term takeaways when we spoke to people later was the relationships that they built from going through an activity like this. And that's what I'm drawing us back to when I say experience design for one another. That's really impactful, and that's something I think we all want in our teams, especially right now when we're not in physical space together. And if there wasn't a black and white answer, maybe there was at least enough information to feel confident in moving forward with decisions. So you'll know from the UX process or from game design process that at some point it's like, when is enough? When am I sure to move forward with this? And just having that answer, like, okay, let's throw that out and do something else. Or, okay, I'm pretty sure we're going to continue exploring that. It's a great resource saver. And most importantly, everyone had a really good time and a lot of fun. And I think that's not to be underestimated when we remember the importance of play. And so VR technology is one example I've used here because that's my experience, but the acceleration of growth in technology isn't going anywhere. So this can be applied to any technology, the importance of experimentation. Neuroscience is new, UX as a field is new, the technology is new, and so experimentation is so important.
Hello, guys. It seems that we just lost Rachel on the way. So let's just hope that she can be back really, really soon. Because she's just at the end of the presentation, so we're waiting for her to join our webinar. Thank you guys for asking the questions here. I'm sure that once Rachel will be back, I see we have 3 or more questions. She will take them on and answer as much as she can. So let's just wait for 1 or 2 more minutes. I don't know anything about VR, so I cannot continue the presentation, but I can tell you I'm looking forward to find out the end of the projects that she was involved in. So let's just wait for 1 minute and probably she'll be back soon. Can you hear me? I hope we can hear me now. So guys, just wanted to tell you that we've reached back Rachel and the wonders of working from home. It seems that there's a storm in Guadalajara, so her power is off. She won't be able to join us. She was just about to finish last couple of ideas on her projects. And I know you have questions for Rachel and curiosities. So what we'll do is that we'll create an opportunity for her to answer to all of your questions on on our Facebook page. We will come back with a recording to finish up everything, and with Rachael answering to all your questions here. So thank you guys so much for watching us today. It was a great pleasure to have so many of you, and with so many corners of the country. It was another Ember Academy webinar. This is the first one with technical issues that keep on going, but it's okay. We are not giving back. No, we're not giving it up. So yes, we'll make sure that this video is available. It's already recorded so far on Facebook, and we'll have a recording with Rachael answering to all of your questions here. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day, evening, whatever the time is where you are. Have a wonderful day ahead, and do not forget, stay safe. Bye, guys.